Hi, I'm Caleb Elijah. In this video, I will walk you through the pre-production, production, and post-production of my short film, Hello Nurse. It was created for and accepted into the 2018 15-second horror film challenge. I was essentially a one-man crew and could not be happier with what myself and a very small cast were able to accomplish. If you haven't already watched it, I'll link to Hello Nurse in the description below. The first thing I did was storyboard Hello Nurse. The storyboard did change a little bit once we got on set, but I was able to stay with it fairly accurately. For the costumes, the first thing I did was walk around thrift stores in town, because not only do they have a large selection, but they're also cheap. That helps a lot whenever you're working with little to no budget. I'd originally found a perfect nurse's uniform, but it was significantly too big, so instead I went with a blue dress that was the same style as a old-fashioned nurse's uniform, but would need to be bleached white. I also got these red shoes because I knew it would match the red logo I was already planning to put on the uniform. Here you can see me attempting to bleach the dress, but nothing happened. I ended up using a full container of bleach and then a second container at home, and it never did change at all. So I kept shopping and I found the dress that you'll see in the short film, and here you can see my mom ironing it. Next, I created a simple stencil out of paper for the Red Cross logo. I taped that down as secure as I could just to make sure it didn't fold up or move when I painted. Then I painted on the Red Cross logo with red acrylic paint, which I watered down with a little bit of alcohol just so it would soak in the fabric better. For the props, I once again went to thrift stores. That's where I found the tray, but the blue shop towels I already had. Next, I needed to make two scalpels. One regular scalpel and a second gag scalpel with a notch cut out to go around the actor's nose. I cut these out of mat board, glued them together with rubber cement, and then any edges where they didn't quite line up, especially at the end, I filled in with this powdered paper mache material from the art department. Next, I sealed everything with a layer of Elmer's glue because there was several different textures and this just made everything the same smooth consistency. Next, I used liquid aluminum paint, also from the art department. This made the mat board look more convincingly like metal so that it would blend in with the metal tray and other tools. I then filed down any glaring imperfections and then went back and painted into the edges and grooves with orange and brown paint until it matched the rust that was on a actual metal tool. To make sure there wasn't any kind of gap between his nose and the scalpel, I also painted on blood just to fill in that little extra bit. It was an afterthought, but with some of the scrap mat board, I also created the nurse's nameplate. This is a small detail, but I think it really helps to add realism. For the syringe that you see on the tray, there's no backstory to it, so it could be anything, and I just chose red fruit punch because it looked a little more ominous and it stood out against the blue shop towel. Next, I added the other tools and the cotton swabs and one baby wipe. Everything you see I either already had or I purchased at a thrift store. The sets were used basically the same way that they already existed. All I had to do was add the Red Cross logo, which you saw there, that I cut out of red cardstock. All I did then was just tape them to the wall. I tried to place everything with a purpose on the tray so that it would look more professional, like an actual doctor or nurse had done it. Here you can see me just setting up and making sure we knew exactly what we were doing and that the lighting was correct. We did the best we could working with the light. I don't know if you can really tell in this particular shot, but the lights are actually closer to the ground than most buildings. That's why there are shadows halfway up the wall closer to the ceiling. It was odd and made for an odd look in the film, but we had to work with it. Because I forgot to put a safety pin on the back of the cardstock nameplate, or mat board, sorry, I actually just taped it on to the dress. And I also used tape to add the logos to the wall. Originally, I also had a white face mask that looked compatible with everything else. Like, it looked like a full nurse's uniform when paired with the uniform and the gloves, but something just didn't feel right about it. Micah is a very pretty girl. She had done this pinup style makeup, and it just didn't feel right to then cover up most of her face with the mask. We did a few test shots like this one just to make sure we had a good place for her to walk. We could have either had her walk to the stairs, which are off camera to the left, or straight towards the camera. After we decided not to go with the mask, we then figured out which looked better, and in the end, it actually looked better to have her walk towards the camera. The room that we shot James getting his nose cut off in was actually a small room inside the art department. But since I was using it as a storage closet at the hospital, I had to make it look like she was walking there within the hospital, mostly with editing. The duct tape that I put around James to make it look like he has been imprisoned there is real duct tape, but to avoid possibly messing up his clothing or pulling at his skin or hair with duct tape, I actually placed some white tissue paper along the sticky side of it and then cut around that so that it still only looked like duct tape. This made things safer for James, but was also a lot more difficult to work with because I had to use small pieces of tape to stick the other duct tape on, which you can see me doing here, and it fell right off. So I had to go back and try it again. I also drew on his face with a makeup pencil so that it looked like eventually they would also do more surgery on him. Originally, I was only going to use a little bit of blood in this because I didn't want to get it all over his clothing, so I used thick blood that would stay on his face. But actually, his girlfriend, who you can see here in the blue shirt, Bethany, she assured me that she would be able to get the blood out of his clothing, so she took some of the edible fake blood that I had and watered it down and then applied it to him herself. This was a really good call on her part because the fake blood watered down just really ran down off of his face, and she even placed a lot of it onto his chest on the duct tape, and it looks great. It definitely wouldn't have the same effect if we hadn't have done that. Next up, Micah just placed the gag scalpel over his nose and did a small sawing motion back and forth to make it look like she was cutting through the nose and that it was having a hard time getting through the cartilage. James did a great job acting, but as you can see, by the time we got finished, he was ready to leave. I ended up shooting with Diana about a week or so after I shot everything else. So it was just me and her for the most part, and for applying the makeup to her supposed surgically added nose, I set up the camera and my makeup in the second floor lobby of my dorm. After applying the bruised makeup to her nose, I then put a small bandage over her nose because in reference photos, that tends to be how things are done. The only problem was you can clearly see the bandage is too big for her nose. That was the smallest bandage I could find, but she just has very small, petite features, and we had to make it work. So after trying to get it to stay down for a few minutes, I just decided to go in and modify it myself. I ended up using a box cutter to just cut off the bottom flaps, and then went back and added a little more makeup to the visible parts since the bandage covered up a lot, and then added some more of the edible fake blood as dried blood in her nose. Here you can see her admiring her beautiful new nose. On set, Diana made it a lot of fun. She's always joking, and you can see here impromptu dancing. But when it came time to actually act and to get it done, she was very professional. In the end, in the final short film, originally I wasn't going to have any dialogue, but whenever we were on set, I wanted to get a couple different reactions from her. So I just asked her to act really excited, however she would in real life, and she ran with it. She acted really excited to a kind of a comical level, and I loved it. It looked great, so that ended up being put in the final short. The first thing I did for the editing was take a still from the ungraded footage and color it in Photoshop. Then I used that to match all of the footage. The sound effect for the scalpel going through James's nose is actually just me cutting through a potato with a knife. And the sound of the blood coming out of his nose is just water in my sink. that is the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, like, subscribe, and please check out my other short films. Until next time, have a great day.